Kimberly Brown-Harden, and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be co-presenting and moderating today. My guest this morning is Nichelle Hayes, librarian from the Center for African American Literature, Culture, and Black Experience at the Indianapolis Public Library. It is also my pleasure to have Christine, I apologize if I mess up your last name, Kujawa, Director of the Bismarck Public Library. She'll be joining us later. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. This webinar is provided as part of the Library Trends and Hot Topic series. To register for other webinars available for this theme or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at library.in.gov. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. The Indiana State Library has many ways we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about the Indiana State Library collection, interview spotlights on library staff from all across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If you do have a question, just type it into the chat box on the upper left of the screen. I'll be watching and we will get to your question to one of the presenters as soon as there's a good opportunity. There should also be time near the end for questions and discussion as well. This session is for 1 hour, so you will get one LEU today. I will be sending those out sometime in the next few weeks, along with the link to this webinar in case you want to refer to it in the future. If at any point during the webinar you experience any technical issues, please enter your issue into the chat box. And now, with all the housekeeping done, we will get started with today's webinar. Again, we just want to say welcome from Nichelle and myself. And here's our agenda for the day. This is what we'll cover. Welcome and introductions. We'll talk about what is civil discourse. We're going to talk about libraries and the social movement, and these are the movements we'll be talking about today. Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, Nashville Public Library, Dakota Access Pipeline, Ken Killing Ken. We're also going to talk about at the end, we'll have a short discussion, what are you all doing at your library? So now let's take a brief look at what civil discourse means. Kenneth J. Gergen describes civil discourse as the language of dispassionate objectivity and suggests that it requires respect of the other participants, such as the reader. It neither diminishes the other's moral worth nor questions their good judgment. It avoids hostility, direct antagonism, or excessive persuasion. It requires modesty and an appreciation for the other participants' experiences. In Book 3 of an essay concerning human understanding in 1690, John Locke contrasts between civil and philosophical discourse, with the former being for the benefit of the reader and the public good. I want to start out with a quote here, and this quote is taken from the National Institute for Civil Discourse. Our founding fathers had a deep and abiding belief in self-governance, the idea that power ultimately resides in the voices and wisdom of the people. So I think that is a very timely quote, especially what's going on in today's culture. And now I just want to warn you, some of the following topics may be considered controversial to some people, but note that we are talking about libraries, librarians, and how we remain neutral and supportive of all the communities that we serve. What I want to do is just have us to take a step back and take these matters into context. And while these things may look scary now, when we look from a historical perspective, such as like the suffrage and the civil rights movement, those were seen as radical and un-American at that time. So I just want to think if, as we are going through these topics, let's take that into consideration today. So first we're going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter was created by Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi as a call to action after the death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. It was a response to the racism experienced by African Americans. Black Lives Matter is an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are seemingly systematically and purposely targeted for violence and death. It is an affirmation of African American contributions to this society, humanity, and resilience in the face of oppression. The Black Lives Matter movement is not anti-white or anti-any other culture, but it is an opportunity to appreciate, celebrate, and uplift Black lives. So the first movement happened, well, not the first, but we'll talk about first, Black Lives Matter in Ferguson, Missouri. Currently, 67% of the 21,000 people who live there are African American. Just to give kind of a summary of what caused this, or what was the precipice, the catalyst, thank you, that led to this. In August 2014, Michael Brown, a young African-American man, was shot and killed by a member of the Ferguson Police Department. The circumstances around the incident and the manner in which the police handled the situation after the shooting were controversial at the time and remain so. The case ignited protests and vigils as well as looting and rioting, while skirmishes between protesters and police on the scene media and others in authority. Governor Jay Nixon imposed curfews that were sometimes ignored, and he eventually called in the National Guard. All of this was featured in the national and global news. The Hands Up account was widely circulated within the Black community immediately after the shooting, and it contributed to the strong protests and outrage about the killing of the unarmed man. The U.S. Department of Justice did not conclude that the Hands Up account was inaccurate until months later. Believing accounts that Brown had his hands up in surrender when he was shot, protesters chanted, "Hands up, don't shoot." Protests, both peaceful and violent, along with vandalism and looting, continued for more than a week in Ferguson. Police established a nightly curfew for citizens there. And here's just a couple pictures that were captured during the movement. So the Ferguson Municipal Library, they were very important in Ferguson and in the community of Ferguson during this, during the riots and the unrest. In November of 2014, when the policeman responsible for the shooting was found not guilty, another wave of protests and riots broke out in Ferguson. Calls for further investigation of the Ferguson administration came from all levels of government. The schools were closed, the streets were in chaos, and the emotions of the residents were at a breaking point. The library, concerned for the safety of its citizens, especially the children, stayed open throughout the crisis. They provided a place for learning and in which students and teachers could meet to create a level of normalcy. The library became the center of community support, and it was where people came to get help. Ferguson Library did many things to support the emotional recovery of the people of Ferguson. They created healing kits, each backpack with a library logo on it, and inside were books and worksheets about coping, source material on civil rights history, a list of resources for adults to get free or inexpensive mental health information nearby, and a teddy bear. Patrons could check out the whole thing and later return the backpack and the books, but they could keep the teddy bear and the worksheets. Ferguson Library also served as one of the galleries hosting an art exhibit entitled Hands Up, Don't Shoot. The show was organized by the Alliance of Black Art Galleries to give local artists the chance to respond to Brown's killing. It opened October 17, 2014 and ran through December 20th the same year. Artwork was exhibited in more than a dozen galleries throughout the area. On the left, this is a sculpture in front of the library. On the right, this is a tweet that was sent out by Ferguson Library Director Scott Bonner in response to the violence and unrest in Ferguson. When violence erupted, Scott was the only librarian on staff, and he kept the library open. When he reached out via social media, many volunteers and supporters around the nation joined him in offering a glimmer of light during a very dark time in that community. So now let's talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement in Baltimore. On April 12, 2015, Freddie Carlos Gray Jr., a 25-year-old black man, was arrested by the Baltimore Police Department for possessing what the police alleged was an illegal switchblade under Baltimore law. Freddie died on April 19th of 2015. His death was ascribed to injuries to his spinal cord. On April 21st, pending an investigation of the incident, 6 Baltimore police officers were suspended with pay. Baltimore erupted in angry protest on the afternoon of Monday, April 27th, following the funeral service for Freddie Gray. Locals clashed violently with Baltimore law enforcement, burned cars and looted businesses, and more than 200 arrests were recorded. The intersection of Pennsylvania and West North Avenue saw the city's worst damage, with a CVS, pharmacy, a Subway restaurant, and a check cashing business all burned. The Pennsylvania Avenue branch of the Enoch Pratt Free Library, which was located across the intersection from the CVS, was directly in the path of the crowd of protesters. The CEO at the time, Carla Hayden, called several members of the leadership team, and after consulting with security officers and branch managers, they decided to keep the buildings open, although staff members were offered the option to leave without penalty. As for the Pennsylvania Avenue location, Carla Hayden left that to the discretion of branch manager Melanie Townsend Diggs. Together, the branch manager and the CEO agreed that the library would lock its doors if there appeared to be any danger to patrons or staff, but would allow them to remain in the library. The library had about 20 customers inside, along with staff, which was about 30 people total. They decided to lock the door. The staff didn't make a big deal about it. They just told the customers that were inside that there was an emergency situation. They offered to usher anyone who wished to leave out through a side door. The branch manager said that the attitude of the customers were, "We're safe in here. We don't want to go." The patrons continued to use the computers and browse the stacks. They went that way for a while, and they even watched vehicles ablaze across the street. The administration and staff agreed unanimously to remain open the following day since schools were closed. The community was here. The community leaders were cleaning up the area, and the administration and staff wanted to have a safe place that people could come in. There were reporters outside, and library administration knew that the reporters would need restrooms, places to charge up, and use Wi-Fi. So it was natural to think that the library needed to be open. All of the staff made it in, the staff from the Central Library, the director and chief, extra security. The library received tremendous support. During the unrest, not one window was broken that Tuesday morning at the library. Every one of the 22 branches were safe. And at this point, I'm going to turn over the mic to my colleague, Nichelle, and she's going to talk about the next social movement.
So the next social movement we're going to be talking about is Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street was a leaderless resistance movement. It began September the 17th, 2011, and it was located in the northeast corner of Liberty Plaza. So here we see a sign from the library in Occupy Wall Street. During the height of the occupation, the library provided free, open, and unrestricted access to a collection of books, magazines, newspaper, zines, pamphlets, and other materials that had been donated, collected, gathered, and discovered during the occupation. Library 3.0 consists of a few mobile units, shopping carts, crates, used by library books in and out of the Occupy Wall Street storage facility and to Liberty Plaza and actions around the city. A volunteer showed up and kept collecting books, tagging books, organizing, and keeping them dry. She proposed taking responsibility for the library and got approval from a group at General Assembly and became the librarian of Occupy Wall Street. The library is entirely made up of donations. As the week went on, more books and more people joined the library. The library collection grew exponentially. By the end of the week, a working group of more than 15 people was assembled for the organization, development, and promotion of the library. These were the members of the library working group who made library decisions by consensus through the ongoing conversation held both online and on the ground. In December of 2011, under orders from Mayor Bloomberg, the New York Police Department, as well as the New York Sanitation Department, dismantled and destroyed the library under the pretense of cleaning up the park. 3,600 books were seized and only 1,003 were recovered. And here are some additional images from the library.
Powerful statement.
So this really shows how powerful books and librarians are to a movement, not just to learn about civil discourse or tactics, but also an opportunity to unwind and think about something else, and to maybe laugh or just transport yourself, which we know is something that books are able to do. So the next movement that we're going to talk about occurred at the Nashville Public Library, Civil Rights in a Civil Society. With the recent conflicts between minority citizens and police across the nation, the Nashville, Tennessee Public Library partnered with the Nashville Police Department to have a revolutionary diversity education initiative to improve understanding and communication between police forces and citizens. In a civil society, diverse individuals' voices are heard and respected, and communities have power and access to enact social change for justice and equality. This quote is coming directly from Jennifer B. Kahn, a doctoral student at the Department of Teaching and Learning at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. So the civil rights and civil society, the focus was to connect Nashville's historic civil rights history and leadership. The program uses Nashville Public Library's Civil Rights Room and collections, and also Civil Rights Room has materials related to the Nashville Civil Rights Movement. Participants are able to gather to discuss community dynamics. The creation of the program began as an equivalent of ongoing protests for racial justice in the United States, and library staff members were asking themselves, how are we responding to what's happening in society? Nashville Public Library was contacted initially by the local police department's training team to give a historical overview to the class of new police recruits. The library questioned how they could combine the request of the police department with the library's desire to develop innovative programming in response to the outcry of the country. The Civil Rights Room collections is done to spark dialogue and learning among Nashville police officers. The room overlooks the intersection of Church Street and 7th Avenue. where nonviolent protests against segregated lunch counters took place over 50 years ago. The historical framework is the goal, and the goal was to raise understanding and empathy within the community. Civil rights and a civil society program was created to have a productive conversation about today's prevalent issues affecting law enforcement and an increasingly diverse population. Through a historical lens, and that historical lens is always important. As you can see, we keep on going back to that. Participants discuss today's complex community dynamics in an environment that encourages open, honest conversation and greater understanding. So here we have a partnership with law enforcement that started with the goal of introducing new recruits to past injustices. And the intent of the program was to use history at the center of engagement. Police department trainers wanted to convey empathy. 817 people received program experience and training. Conversations about otherness, that somehow conversations would help in developing those virtues that are important in civil society. The police department, as recruits encounter new neighborhoods, people, and actions, they have developed another layer of empathy, a skill desperately needed in a civil society and one vital to removing the barriers between divided communities. Of the 817 people, this number was mostly adults. 167 civilians, which included students, nonprofits, community groups, government employees, 650 law enforcement personnel statewide and not just in Nashville. So this was a program that really had a far reach and a big impact. So there were multiple ways of engagement for this, which is always important. So they were looking at the historical truths and the historical framework. Oftentimes when we're in the middle of these different conflicts and crises, it's easy to think we've never traveled down this road before, but if you're a student of history, you know there's really nothing new under the sun, and there are lots of things that we can learn by looking at the things of the past. And also there was social commentary, developing those counter narratives, and then using the Socratic method. So for an example with the Socratic method, the team asked questions for clarification such as, how does this image of John Lewis being dragged off a stool at a lunch counter relate to our discussion on blank? And the team would ask questions that examine assumptions. So maybe someone would assume John Lewis was in the wrong. Maybe someone would assume that John Lewis was being threatened without any provocation. You just want to bust down those assumptions, and you want people to think critically about a situation. When police officers are faced with situations on the street, they have to make split-second decisions. And so it's a good idea to kind of bust down those assumptions, and maybe we can make a different assumption versus the previous one. So the design also includes questions about viewpoints and perspectives. Example, what's another way to look at this particular situation? So this is the Civil Rights Room, and it's been a part of the library since 2003. The space includes Nashville's complicated history, and I would hazard to say that most communities have a complicated history with the civil rights movement. There are also photos and documents concerning the monumentous civil rights events. It also includes a replica of a lunch counter at the centerpiece of that particular room. So the space is dedicated to engaging communities in conversations about the current issues of equality and intercultural development. The room offers a current voice and venue for open dialogue and discovery. They also host events and organizations that are promoting social diversity. And I think that's almost the most important piece because this is not a one and done kind of activity. This is something that has to be ongoing. You have to continue this work in order for it to really take hold in the different communities. And next we're going to have some pictures showing new recruits from the police department. and then also the civil rights training that police officers encountered. So we're going to transfer again for a moment, and Kim is going to take up the next section.
Thank you, Nichelle. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the Dakota Access Pipeline. And this changed, even the circumstances and the outcome has changed about the Dakota Access Pipeline since I originally put this together. But just to give a little context and background about the Dakota Access Pipeline, that it is in a 1,172-mile underground 30-inch pipeline extending from the Bakken oil fields Three Forks production area in North Dakota to Patoka, Illinois. It crosses beneath the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, as well as under part of Lake Oahe near the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. Transport domestically produced light sweet crude oil from North Dakota to major refining markets. And again, the entire pipeline is underground. The pipeline can eliminate approximately 500 to 740 rail cars and or 250 or more trucks needed to transport crude oil every day. And as you can see, 99.98% of the pipeline is installed on privately owned property in North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and Illinois. The pipeline was advertised as one of the most safest, most technologically advanced pipelines in the world. It's to keep prices lower for refined products such as gas. Approximately 1,000 certificates, permits, and approvals were granted for the pipeline. And that's about one permit or approval for every mile of pipeline. So let's talk a little bit about the controversy. So the developer ignored the Obama administration's request to voluntarily halt construction on federal land. The Dakota Access Pipeline protests are a grassroots movement that began in early 2016 in reaction to the approved construction of the Energy Transfer Partners Dakota Access Pipeline. What began as a small protest camp in April on the Standing Rock Reservation has since morphed into an encampment with well over 1,000 people. Over the past few months, the Sacred Stone Camp, as it is now called, has been the site of a number of antagonistic face-offs between protesters and the oil company. The pipeline would pass through areas of great cultural significance, such as sacred sites and burials that federal law seeks to protect. And again, and that is the major component of the controversy of this. So the tribe sued the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is the primary federal agency that granted permits needed for the pipeline to be constructed. The Army Corps took an illegally narrow view of its responsibilities to protect and engage the tribe when it granted the permits. The lawsuit alleges that the Corps violated multiple federal statutes, including the Clean Water Act, National Historic Protection Act, and National Environmental Policy Act when it issued the permits. Shortly after the lawsuit was filed, the pipeline company, Dakota Access LLC, intervened in the lawsuit, making them a full party as well. The Standing Rock Sioux leader, Elder LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, established a camp. And this represented as a center for cultural preservation and spiritual resistance to the pipeline. Over the summer, the camp grew to over thousands of people. Much of the pipeline has been completed as of late 2016, so the Missouri crossing has been an increasingly controversial topic. And again, with things happening now with the new administration, there have been some changes, unfortunately. I just want to share a few pictures about the movement. This is the map of the Great Sioux Reservation and Native American lands in South Dakota, North Dakota. And the pictures were taken from the Sacred Stone Camp Facebook page. And here's the hashtags that you're probably familiar with and been on Twitter. Hashtag no DAPL, hashtag water is life. And here's some more pictures to capture the movement. So now I want to talk about the North Dakota Library's role. They rented meeting room space. They provided a safe space for discussion of the issue, and they maintained a neutral role. The meetings were held at the Bismarck Veterans Memorial Public Library, which is a full-service municipal library that handles the needs of Bismarck and Burleigh County residents. I will now turn the mic over to Christine, who is the library director, and she can talk about the experience and how this tied into what we do provide our citizens. Take it away, Christine.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm enjoying this as a participant as much as a speaker. As Kimberly explained, the Dakota Access Pipeline, or DAPL, activity has caused individuals to come out both for and against construction of it, which has resulted in very high tension within that area and the surrounding areas, which includes Bismarck, where our library is located. And Bismarck is about 1 hour north of the pipeline. The majority of conversation about the pipeline has taken place on social media, and people on both sides of the issue are passionate about it, but unfortunately there's been a lot of really negative, hateful, and at times racist dialogue. A positive interaction relating to conversation involving people on both sides of the issue took place at our library, which is what Kimberly had just mentioned. So at our library, we offer meeting rooms available for the public to rent for a nominal fee, and I'm sure a lot of you have meeting room space too. It's common for a public library setting. And clubs and organizations in the area often opt to use our meeting rooms rather than hotels or other venues, just due to the affordable price and the proximity in the city, because we're centrally located on all sides of the city. So in November of last year, a nonprofit called Dakota Resource Council decided to organize a panel discussion consisting of people who had been vocal about protesting the construction of the pipeline. And they thought if the community had an opportunity to hear directly from them and could ask questions, it might clear up misinformation. So they chose to hold the panel discussion at the library for the reasons I stated, but also because our citizens know and trust us to be a neutral, safe space in the community. And they chose to rent our largest meeting room space, not knowing how many people might be interested in attending, and that room has a capacity of 200 people. And as you can see in the photo, it was standing room only in the back. So we filled every chair. It was standing room, and some people actually had to stand in the hallway because we were past our fire code. So they had a great turnout for this. And people from both sides of the issue attended. And that evening something happened that had not happened up to that point. And that was that everyone who was in attendance respectfully listened to the speakers. They asked questions. There is no yelling or name calling, only listening and learning from each other. And the Dakota Resource Council, not knowing how popular the event would be, they had somebody in the back of the room live streaming it on Facebook. And interestingly, maybe not surprising, while people who were meeting face-to-face in the same room were having a democratic debate about the issue, the people who were watching it on Facebook continued to respond with the same angry and hateful posts. And I think there's something powerful about coming together in a neutral space in person to discuss things. That feeling of anonymity on social media isn't there, where you can post anything that you'd like and then just kind of walk away from it. In my experience, at least at our library, and especially with this situation, when you're face-to-face with someone attempting to have a discussion, you're making a physical human connection. and it seems more likely that you'll find common ground. Did attendees who thought one way going in change their minds afterwards? I don't know. But what I do know is that our public library was able to provide a neutral meeting space for the community to discuss and debate an issue that has people very passionate on both sides. And every single person who attended did so with respect and without being mean-spirited or aggressive. And this is really one example of how libraries bring communities together and how our buildings serve as cornerstones of democracy. And I tell people that all the time when we offer our meeting room space. And every time I say it, I get goosebumps because I really feel that this is an important thing for libraries to be able to offer and to bring their communities together. And if I have time, I'd just like to read a little excerpt. Kimberly had mentioned toward the beginning that throughout history there are examples of civil discourse and people who've come forward on issues that maybe talking about it wouldn't be safe, or so they. Oh, I'm sorry, I just cut out for a second. Can you still hear me? Okay. So where they come together and they feel that it's important for the community to talk about things. And this year is our library's 100-year anniversary. So we're starting to go through our archives and all of our records. And we came across annual reports from our library director who worked during World War II. And I'd just like to close with what she wrote in July of 1944. The series of 8 forums held on the following subjects: youth, race relations, rural health service, world relations, community planning, and equal rights for women attracted attendance ranging from 40 to 150 persons. We are gratified with the results. We believe this can become one of the library's most effective means of creating an informed public opinion. So in 1944, it was felt that this was important. It's still just as important today. And we had examples at the beginning regarding the importance of offering books to communities during difficult times. And just real quick, I just want to read one more quote that's from the same annual report. And the librarian says that in conclusion, she'd like to reaffirm our faith in the work of the public library in the community. And she quotes the librarian at the Toronto Public Library at that time, which says, "In our annual report of a year ago, we presented a statement of our faith in the public library as the pivot of democracy. That faith remains. It can be restated by saying that if a community is permitted to think, and democracy rests its case on this, it must have books. And books means libraries, and libraries for most of us means public libraries. We still believe with full sincerity that the job of book provision for the fundamental purpose of making it possible for ourselves to think with intellectual honesty, to think with informed minds, remains the primary job of public libraries, even in wartime, and even today." That concludes what I have to talk about. I don't know if you want me to take questions at this point or continue with your presentation, but I do thank you for having me here to speak with you today and to share this positive experience that we had.
Thank you so much, Christine. I haven't seen any questions in the chat box, but thank you again for participating with us today. I hope you if you have time, that you'll stay with us in case there are questions at the end. Now I want to give the mic back over to my colleague, Nichelle.
That was so powerful what Christine just said, and those quotes. I really would like to get a copy of those quotes. They're so timely, even though they're from 1944, and I'd like to have those to distribute them to my network. What I want to talk about now is a program and also a display that we had at the Indianapolis Central Library in Indianapolis called Kin Killing Kin. Kin Killing Kin was the centerpiece of the library's 2-month Stand for Peace initiative. And this exhibit presented as an homage to the city's 2014 homicide victims. And it was supposed to be a catalyst to initiate discourse on local issues and interaction through wraparound activities. So it was a visually powerful exhibit, and it composed of graphic images created by James Pate. And one of the most important, he is one of the most important African American artists in the United States. His work addresses one of the critical social issues of our time, and that is the epidemic of youth violence in the African American community. There is also a website, and I believe we can give you the URL for that, but the website also gives resources for organizations that are doing peace work. So they spotlight 100 Black men, Eskenazi health violence prevention programs, the Indianapolis Cultural Trail Peace Walk, the Indianapolis Peace and Justice Center, as well as the Peace Dove Sculpture and Peace Learning Center. So it was a very holistic approach, discourse, resources, books, which I'm going to get to, as well as the visual arts. So here's a picture of the artist, James Pate, and then the curator, Bing Davis. So both of them came together to really make a really powerful program. James was moved to use art as a means of illustrating this tragedy, and he indicates every piece that he contemplates is a way of accepting some of the responsibilities for these acts of violence. Every piece is a moment of silence and dedication to the people who have had to deal personally with our losses. And Bing Davis, the curator, indicates that Kin Killing Kin is a powerful and thought-provoking series of images that reflect James Pate's deep love for our youth and great concern for the epidemic of youth violence in the African American community. Pate is a master visual artist who has directed his artistic vision to the issue of youth violence because it is one of the most critical social ills of our time. So Kin Killing Kin, the exhibit was a personal statement that art can be a change agent, and the dialogue that goes along with it. It was also a visual call to action, and it was a centerpiece of the Stand for Peace initiative. And this was a 2-month program. And here is a screenshot of one of the pages on the website, and it gives some books as resources. So again, to do that deep work after the dialogue and after looking at the art, to think about what is your call to action, what can you do now in your community to make a change. So it helps them to continue to think about the subject and then determine if they want to participate and how they will do so. So the Stand for Peace is a part of a community conversation, which is very important, and it explored the conditions of violence and also provided a way for people to pause, reflect, and express their feelings. And so now I'm going to take a few moments to talk a little bit about a new initiative that the Indianapolis Public Library has started. So we are going to be opening up a Center for African American Literature, Culture, and Black Experience in the Arbianus West Reading Room in Central Library in Indianapolis. So our Central Library is also celebrating its 100th anniversary. And so this is a big year for our centennial celebration. And the new center is going to be opening up in the Arbianus West Reading Room, which is part of the Cray, which is part of the original building. So we were fortunate enough to receive funding from Lilly Endowment through the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation. So our current strategic plan affirms our commitment to diversity, and it challenges us to seek new opportunities to enhance what we offer. So the center will allow the Indianapolis Public Library to expand on the work of the African American History Committee. And two of their signature programs are Meet the Artists, Fall Fest Slam and Rhymes, and also Ken Killing Ken, which is something that we just showed. So we are hoping that we can bring together people in the community so that we can have discourse, have panel discussions, and create greater understanding across groups and social lines. As you can see on the screen here, we have windows and mirrors. And the windows are going to provide a view into other cultures, and that's what we're hoping that the center will do. But it will also be a mirror to the African American community, and especially young people, so that they can see themselves in different ways as poets, as authors, and to really believe that they can do anything that they set their mind to as they move forward. So we really want to expand and spotlight the rich history of African Americans, especially those here in Indianapolis. So we're going to be talking about Mari Evans, our beloved poet, Etheridge Knight, another poet who lived here in Indianapolis, and then new and up-and-coming authors like Carmen Glenn and Tammy Winfrey Harris. So we're going to be opening in October of 2017. We invite everyone to check us out on Facebook, the NDPL African American History Committee. And then we're also going to be having a screening of the Crispus Attucks documentary, The School That Opened a City, on March the 25th at 2 p.m. We're going to have some prominent panelists there who will do a Q&A after the screening. So this is one more opportunity for us to talk and have a better understanding of our history and also the current climate of where we are. And now I will pass the mic back to Kim.
All right, thank you, Nichelle. Thank you for sharing that information with everyone. I want to just talk about one final movement here, which is one that is local. And this was for the Women's March. The teens at Westchester Library, they made posters for the march, and they were participating in Chicago. The teens expressed themselves with supplies that they brought and set up. And I want to use a quote here from Julia Christensen, branch librarian of the Westchester Public Library. She says, "I was happy to see teens expressing themselves and choosing the library as a safe, non-judgmental place. To me, this means we are doing something right here, providing a comfortable, free environment for our community members, including our youth." And when she shared that with me, I was just so excited to see that again, during difficult times, during times of unrest, our patrons see us as a safe place. Our patrons see us as non-judgmental and see us as a way to express themselves, even the teens. And I was so excited and happy to see that. So now I'm going to turn this part of the presentation over to you all. Just have a little short discussion here or take questions. What are you doing at your libraries to promote civil discourse? And how do you support your communities? But first off, I have a question here from Tiffany Carter, and this is a question for Christine. She wants to know, was there any resistance from the community in hosting those types of community forums? And was there backlash from administration or staff?
Regarding the community, we did receive a couple of comments regarding our choice to allow Dakota Resource Council to use the room for the panel discussion. We were able to answer, though, with by telling those people that they met the criteria of our meeting room policy. And I really think that if we have well-written policies, in most situations, we will be able to say whether or not something can take place or not, because it's really easy for librarians to self-censor, which is a completely different topic, I know. But yeah, so we did receive some resistance, but we were able to tell them that our meeting room policy criteria was met, and that's what the meeting rooms are meant to be used for. As far as staff, we did have some staff who voiced concerns about not knowing if it would be safe or not. And that wasn't necessarily related to one side or the other. It was just both of them coming together. Because as I had said earlier, most of the discussion took place on social media, and that just seems like a breeding ground for hateful comments. That's just me, maybe. So anyhow, we just told them that we did not anticipate having any problems, and I worked that evening just to make sure they all knew that nothing was going to happen, and of course nothing did happen, and it was a very positive experience. From administration, they were actually happy that the Dakota Resource Council chose us as their location, because they also see us as a neutral and safe position where the community come together and talk about different issues.
Great, thank you, Christine. Did anybody else have any questions for Christine? Or again, if you just have any general questions or discussion. Wow, looks like we have Monica Casanova. You're having educational programs on Black Lives Matter and Islam. That sounds wonderful. Will you please send me an email, Monica, and let me know how that comes out afterwards? I would love to hear how that went. Karen, wow, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, she had patrons, Karen from Westchester said patrons made liar bookmarks and putting in the new Donald Trump books that we offer. And they're also turning those books to have, to face the backs of the shelves. Wow, very powerful. Oh, there's a comment. Someone said that they're in a tiny town in their library and they have a very conservative board. Yeah, that can be very tough. Dennis Everett sounds like, oh, it sounds like a great idea. They're going to start doing public forums similar to what was done in North Dakota and doing a speaker's corner. Wow, that sounds good too.
I was fortunate enough, this is Nichelle again, I was fortunate enough to go to the Schomburg Research Library in Harlem in January, and they had a really powerful program titled Dear President, What You Need to Know About Race Relations. Wow. And so what they had was about 4 different micro conversations. So 2 different individuals having a conversation on stage that lasted about 10 or 15 minutes. Then there was a comedian to kind of break up a little bit of the tension, and then Q&A at the end. So there are lots of ways to kind of spark these conversations and to really to get people thinking in a different kind of way.
Wow. That sounds cool. Okay. There's a question from, I'm sorry, Jenny Law. It says, if we are not in the epicenter of a circumstance or event, what are some ways that we can still reach to our communities? Jenny, I think you could do something like book talks. You can do film screenings, things like that. You can do like open forums, open discussions. If there's anybody else that has anything for her, I'm sure she'd be greatly appreciative.
And I think something else for us to think about, you indicate that your community is not at the epicenter, but we often are unaware of what different communities or minority communities or communities of color are dealing with. So I think that would be a great opportunity to bring those individuals together, because whereas some people feel like, oh, everything is fine here, we don't have any problems, there are other people in the community that have a different story, and it's important to tell that story.
Excellent point. I have a comment. Michael Cruz, we got a grant to partner with the other Ripley County Public Libraries to present a program on a world of faith and cultures in our neighborhoods at each library. Guest speakers will lead discussions. Wow, that sounds great. Thank you. Oh, and then another comment from Kim Blaha. I've been thinking of ways to encourage the community and to help them through these times. Yeah, that is very much needed. What a great way to try to show support to your community.
And I think something else to ponder as we're doing this work, self-care is very important. Several times Christine talked about the vitriol that we see on Facebook and some social media because people are disconnected. It's important to unplug and to take care of yourself and to kind of focus on doing something restorative. So you just want to balance that out with the work that you're doing, especially because you are on the front lines.
Yes, definitely. Okay, Tiffany shared that some of the staff have chosen to read Everyday Bias by Howard J. Ross for personal and professional development together as a staff development book club. That sounds great, Tiffany. Will you share with us how that went afterwards? Yes, Kim, balance is so hard. I agree. So we have a few more minutes, actually about 2 more minutes. So if you all still have questions or if you still have comments, please keep those coming. For those of you who have to leave, I do understand. But yeah, we have a couple minutes, so please keep your questions and your comments coming.
So personally, I've learned a lot just from being a panelist on this webinar, and it seems as though the participants have as well. So hopefully this is work that we can build on and use this as a foundation, because again, as we said, this is not a one and done. This is something that needs to be ongoing.
Yeah. Yep. Our communities definitely need us now more than ever. Well, if there are no further questions, here is myself and Nichelle's contact information. I apologize, I didn't have Christine's ready. Oh. Kim had a question. Can we hear more about this? We need encouragement and ideas as front lines in our communities. Kim, are you talking about maybe like a follow-up webinar, or what were you? Oh, Christine, her contact information is CKUJAWA@bismarcklibrary.org. So if you need to reach out to her, that's her email. Okay, Kim wants to know what others do and more input from the ISL. Okay, what I can do, Kim, is try to put together some of the responses of what we learned today and kind of send out to the attendees. Would that be helpful? Okay, we'll do that. I'll have transcript of the chat box and get that together and send out what you all are doing and send to each other so that you all can kind of learn from each other. Well, again, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you for all of the wonderful things that you all are doing. We do know it's difficult, but you all are doing great work out there. And so we definitely appreciate you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.